Okay, here we go with Red Kayak by Priscilla Cummings, Chapter 8. Now, in Chapter 7, Brady had been abruptly pulled out of school fast by his mom. He doesn't know why. He was at school, and they had had an assembly, and he was feeling very good about the day and trying not to think negatively. So let's see what happens here with Chapter 8. Brady, I need to talk to you. Mom's voice, so close, startled me. I whirled around from my locker. What in the world? Please, Brady, she said firmly, grabbing my forearm. Outside, I need to talk to you. I was a little stunned. It wasn't like either of my parents to just show up in school the way they had the last 2 days. But I didn't argue. Mom was harried. In fact, her hair wasn't totally dry, and I realized that she was wearing the purple sweater she only wears to work, but with a pair of jeans like she was half dressed. Pushing our way through all the kids and commotion, I followed her to the front entrance. I thought sure someone would make a wise crack, but no one seemed to notice my mother, and if they did, they didn't care. "Way to go, Brady!" one boy down the hall yelled. When the heavy front doors closed behind us, we looked at each other. It was cold, and neither of us had a jacket. "What is it?" I asked. She hesitated, started rubbing her arms to get warm, but then she decided she wasn't going to tell me there on the front steps of the school either. "Let's get in the car for a minute," she said, heading off toward our Jeep, which was parked at the curb. It was getting weird. We got into the front seats, and when my mother pulled her door closed and sighed, it hit me. She had bad news about Ben. Ben was in a coma or something. He did have brain damage. Somehow they already knew that he would never be the same. Instead, my mom turned to me and she said, "Ben died." At first, I didn't think I heard right. "What? What did you just say?" "Ben is dead, Brady. He died this morning. It was on the news, and I thought I'd better get to school before somebody told you in the hallway or those television people showed up." "But he was alive!" I tried to argue. "Carl had a pulse." "I know." She looked down at the steering wheel and nodded. The news threw me off. Slowly, I fell back in the seat and stared straight out the windshield. As I did, the Cloverland dairy milk truck pulled away from where it was backed up to the school for delivery. And when it passed in front of us, the smiling black and white cow painted on its side was unavoidable. And in that instant, I thought to myself, Ben is never going to drink any more milk. Stupid, but that was my first thought. Ben would never drink another cup of milk from those little spout cups of his. I felt my mother's hand touch mine. "I'm so sorry, Brady," she said. "I know this is going to be hard for you." "Why?" I demanded, turning to her. "Why did he die?" Mom's eyes shone. I could see that she'd been crying and figured this hurt her too, because it was a little like when we lost Amanda. "I don't know," she replied, and when she blinked, a tear ran down her cheek. "I guess because he was in that cold water for so long." I felt my own eyes fill up. "Shoot!" I exclaimed, kicking at a Kleenex box on the floor. "I should have got there faster." "No, Brady." Mom tried to grab my hand, but I pulled it away and put it up over my face. "It is not your fault. Don't you dare blame yourself. You tried, Brady. You did everything that you could. If you hadn't found him and done what you did, he wouldn't have had any chance. You, at least, gave him that." Did I? Did I do everything that I could? An enormous hole opened up in my chest. I took in a huge gulp of air and I held it for a moment, and then I grew still. When I took my hand away from my eyes, I saw the dairy truck disappear down the highway and watched the noisy sixth graders run out onto the field for gym. If we talked any more, I can't remember. All I know is my mom said, "Let's go home," and we did. And for a while, I sat at the kitchen table, numb, while Mom called school and made sure the television interview had been canceled. And then I moved into my room and I sat at the end of my bed staring at the floor. I started thinking that the only thing I wanted to do was go find the red kayak and bring it in. It seemed like a small, insignificant thing. The D'Angelos probably would never want to see it again, but it's all I could think about doing. So I changed into grubby jeans and I reached for my hat, my Baltimore Orioles cap, and then I thought, no, this is the hat that Ben just wore right before he died. Not that I'm superstitious, but I didn't feel right about it. I set it down on my bureau, and I took another instead, and then grabbed one of Dad's winter coats because now both of mine were gone. One in the ambulance with Ben, and the other one at school, and I headed down to the dock. Tilly followed at my heels. She wanted to come in the worst way, but I wouldn't let her in the boat. I don't know why. Go on! I hollered at her when she barked and tried to hop in after I undid the lines. I motored straight to the spot in the cove where I had found Ben, cut off the engine, and I let the boat drift. I was trying real hard not to think of how I messed up. How I could have called out a warning when we first saw them. But even if I had yelled, would Mrs. D'Angelo have heard me? And if she had, would she have listened? Who knows? I should have tried, though. At least then she would have been alerted to the danger, and maybe she would have come back before it was too late. Or maybe I could have found Ben earlier. Just think, if I hadn't gone up that first creek, if I'd gotten there 5 minutes sooner. The fact that I went from being a hero to a great big nothing in just a few hours didn't bother me. The other stuff was just too big. The water was calm, solid brown because of how the rain had stirred everything up the day before. You could still smell the storm, the wet logs, the damp grass, the muddy riverbank. I knew I'd never find the kayak. Most likely it had gone out with the tide and floated downriver. Either that or it was washed up somewhere along the bay shore, maybe even as far down as the Bay Bridge. A kayak was pretty hard to sink. It would turn up eventually, but what would it matter? What was I going to do with it anyway? Usually, being out on the water made me feel free. Whenever things at school bothered me, I went out on the water to shake it off. But that day, all it did was make me feel sick to my stomach. I noticed how, nearby, the roots to a big sweet gum tree, exposed by erosion on the riverbank, suddenly looked like a swarm of snakes slithering into the water. And just then an eagle flew over and split the air in half with its terrible screech. Made me jump, it was so loud. You hardly ever saw an eagle. A pair of them lived nearby, let alone even heard one. But I figured it was yelling at me. It saw everything that happened on the river yesterday, and it was letting me know. Unfair, I thought. My teeth clenched, and a tremendous surge of anger burst out of me. I screamed, "You didn't have to kill him!" And I yelled that at the river. My voice echoed in the hollow that surrounded the quiet cove. "Kill him, kill him, kill him," echoed. "You didn't have to be so cold!" I accused, but the anger was gone. Turned into something else already. "You didn't have to make Ben die," I muttered before I began to cry. Some people, I guess, they be railing at God for letting a thing like that happen, but me, I cussed out the river. And you know what? Nothing happened. And when I finished crying, there wasn't a sound to be heard except for the gentlest lap of waves on the nearby sandbar. The river didn't care. A strange, chilly feeling settled around me then, just like an invisible fog. What was I going to do? And whatever compelled me to look down, I will never know. But this is the truth. When I leaned over to peer into the river, the water was not brown and full of sediment, but perfectly clear. And at the bottom, a few feet down, I could see the red kayak. And that's the end of chapter 8. So a couple of questions. What will he do with the red kayak anyway? What is it significant to him for? Is it just going to make him feel better? And I guess this was the big chapter. I don't know if you saw Ben, him dying in this chapter, or just thought he was going to be injured or whatever. But the reality is, this 3-year-old boy has died, and Brady's going to have to process that as we move forward. So we'll have to see what happens next with chapter 9.